and welcome to LearnBytes, the show that delivers bite-sized pieces of wisdom so you can learn how to increase your efficiency and productivity, embrace your natural creativity, and lead with impact. I'm Samantha Garrett from Using Technology Better, and joining me on the show today is Christy Roberts. Hey, Christy, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're most welcome. That shows the speed my brain is at today. I was preempting what you're saying. So it's going to be an interesting interview. Nonetheless, so Christy is a mindset and results coach and the founder of Creating Change. And she is here with us today to talk about leadership. Yes. So Christy, now you know, like this is bite-sized. We've got like 4 minutes, 8 questions, and then a little chat at the end. But before we jump into that, I thought you might like to share a little bit about yourself and what you're passionate about.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for having me here today. It's awesome to be able to reach more people. Love what you're doing. Look, my background is human resources. I've spent over 20 years in HR. Organizational development is my specialty. I've worked with leaders across the country for pretty much my entire adult career. About 15 years ago, I started delving into personal growth, which has led me into coaching. So it's been a natural, organic progression for me. So I'm now a qualified trainer, qualified life coach, and results coach. And I guess in a nutshell, I'm passionate about understanding human behavior, understanding the human mind, like why we do the things that we do, right? And also tapping into our full potential. So how can we live our best life? And, you know, when I launched Creating Change several years ago, it was all about how can we live our best life? How can we be extraordinary? Because it wasn't until I got into coaching and all this personal growth that I realized how ordinary my life was. And so it's through that journey that, you know, it's just there's so much more in each and every one of us. And so I'm really passionate about finding that potential, understanding what's blocking, what's challenging people, and how we can sort of lift people up. And so that's all great. That's all wonderful. But then tragedy struck. So tragedy hit my life last year. So at the beginning of COVID, as we were moving into restrictions, my 18-year-old son, Aaron, was in a car accident. And, you know, this was life-changing because Aaron actually died on scene. So in the blink of an eye, and I try not to get emotional, but in the blink of an eye, actually, it's okay to get emotional, isn't it?
It is, Christy. Very much so.
My whole world imploded. So here I am, you know, living your extraordinary life, queen and master of the mind and all this sort of thing. And my life was just hit with grief. And the magnitude of that grief is life-changing. You can't just, it's not something you just get over. It becomes part of who you are. And you literally need to recalibrate your mind to incorporate that sadness, that life that I'm no longer going to live, the fact that my son is no longer here. Like there's just so many layers to this conversation, and this is a bite-sized conversation, so we don't have time to go into it. But suffice it to say, tragedy struck and it literally changed my whole world and will forever, really. And so I really had to look at my work because it just didn't quite sit right. But I still love the idea of living your extraordinary life. That still rings very true to me, but it's how can you live your extraordinary life? How can you live your best life in spite of the challenges that life throws at us? And so that's where I've landed, because the thing is, oh my God, every single person has their stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone, we've all got our stuff, and life happens. Life happens. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know when it's going to happen, but stuff happens, and it happens to each and every one of us. So my work now has shifted somewhat. I've discovered a modality called self-directed healing. And because one thing I learn about grief is it's a really physical experience. That those emotions are so deep and so strong when you're in that shock and that trauma of it, that it becomes very physical. And self-directed healing is a modality that works quite somatically in style, where we actually energetically feel our emotions and our limiting beliefs physically in our body, and we shift them through the body. It's been an absolute game changer for me. It's really helped me a lot with my grief. So I've become a self-directed healing practitioner, and I'm now the senior trainer worldwide for self-directed healing. And so I've really stepped up into that space. It's been a challenging journey because I've been doing this right through my grief. But this is a way I can create meaning around my son's life, around building his legacy and helping others through this grief, through this tragedy, by understanding grief as best I can, understanding it's different for everyone, but unlocking the emotions and just helping people move, because too many people get stuck in their grief.
Yeah.
And we don't need to get stuck in our grief. There are other ways. So one thing that I've learned, and this is coming back to productivity, is that time doesn't heal all wounds. It just doesn't. It's what we do with our time that counts. And so one thing that I've done, apart from the self-directed healing and the coaching, is I am using my organizational development and HR experience to develop workshops that I can take into the workplace. Yeah. So I'm taking my life coaching skills, my training skills, my healing skills into the workplace. And I've developed a How to Master Your Time workshop, which is full of practical tips, tools, models, strategies, like proven time management tools. Yeah. But the focus isn't just about managing your time. It's actually about diving into, what are we managing our time for? What is most important to us? Like, what are we freeing up the time for? What is going to make us ultimately feel, that peace, that joy, that happiness, that love that we're all seeking? Now, the skills are transferable because they work personally and they work in the workplace as well. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, totally.
But when you look at time, it's just like this storm that just too many people are stuck in. Like, how many people are so busy? We're so busy. But what are we actually busy about?
Yeah.
Like, what are we busy about?
Such a good question. And thank you first for sharing so openly your story. I really appreciate that, Christy, setting the scene for our conversation today. And I just love that, the question again, like, what are we busy about? Because at the end of the day, it comes back to like living your best life. But to me, that's around, living up to what's possible, what you could do and how you can be here and helping others, and, which is amazing. And, to your point, we can't just wait for everything to be perfect in life to do that, because guess what? Not going to happen. Or even if it happens for a short period of time, something will derail us. So I love that your work helps people do that regardless of what's going on. And you're such a testament to that. So
thank you. And that's the thing. It's like, think of life as a journey, and we're driving the car. Like, we choose where to steer that car, that's up to us. And even by not doing things, that's still a choice.
It is. So true. Yeah.
And a lot of people don't really get that. So what we don't do is just as important as what we do and how we do it. Yeah.
I love that. Well, that's given us a great springboard into the questions. Are you ready for the fast round?
I am.
Cool. All right. So I'm just going to put my timer on. Don't mind me. I'm just getting that sorted. So 4 minutes, 8 questions on leadership. So I'll give you a warning about 1 minute out too.
Oh, it's going to be tricky. I do love to talk.
Well, we can bring it home, Christy. Come on. All right. First mobile phone and current phone.
Yeah, so it was a Nokia. I don't have a lot of memory about my first current phone, but it was way back, like 2000. I waited a long time to get my first mobile phone. I didn't want one, but I was traveling from Baronia to St Kilda Road. I had kids in creche. It was like, I actually need one now. But I've now got an iPhone 11. Yeah.
Now, what do you think is the most important quality for every leader to have?
There's so many qualities, but for me, I believe communication. Because so many of the other qualities and attributes actually come in, like, it's a big bucket umbrella, right?
Yeah.
The capacity to build and show respect, build trust, conflict management, coaching, mentoring, performance management, influence, and having the courage to have tough conversations. For me, they all fall into that communication banner. And I do have a workshop on how to have crucial conversations.
Ooh, well, that's good to know. We'll link that in the notes, definitely.
Okay.
Right. Number 3, what do you find most rewarding or challenging about being a leader?
I think for me, it's really challenging to be vulnerable, because that's not a space that I was grown. I wasn't raised to be vulnerable. Yeah. I was raised to be, I'm quite the alpha female. So, I've learned to be tough. I've learned not to have emotions, so showing my emotions has been a challenge for me, but having the courage to do that, like speak up, even if your voice shakes, that's been really challenging, but it's also been my biggest reward, because when I can demonstrate that vulnerability, people listen, people people really resonate with that, especially with my grief. Like, it's still so raw. This is just over a year for me. So it does take a lot of courage to talk and be vulnerable and talk about my grief. So that's probably my biggest challenge that I've learning to overcome. I'd say the most rewarding part is knowing how much I help and inspire other people, because I get messages from time to time from people who are sharing my content with someone they care about, with someone that's struggling. The people that come to my workshops get a lot of value. So watching people transform and watching them shift and change their lives and their faces, just become lighter. And that's my magic.
Yeah.
Right. That's my biggest reward. Yeah.
So we've got 1:39. We're on question 4. What is the one thing you tell yourself when facing uncertainty?
That I'm moving out of my comfort zone and that uncertainty is good for me.
Ooh, okay. Yeah. We might come back to that.
If we're not growing, we're not learning.
Okay.
So when I'm learning, I'm challenging myself. So I tell myself, if I'm uncertain, of course I'm uncertain because it's new. I'm moving out of my comfort zone, so I can handle it.
Biggest leadership lesson learned so far?
Curiosity. Get really curious. So learn to understand myself, learn to understand others. There's a lot of power in that. As a leader, it's not about having all the answers. So get really curious. How can I add more value? How can I do this better? How can we as a team do this better? Like, how can I be a better leader? So, I see leadership like a conduit for helping others discover their greatness, and not about me being perfect. It's, we all make mistakes.
Yes.
So that sort of humanity. But how can I own that, show up and just keep showing up? Yeah.
All right, 30 seconds. Let's try and be quick. If there was one person you could spend an hour with, who would it be and why?
Nelson Mandela, because he's just truly inspirational.
Love it. Book, video, or podcast that you would recommend to others?
Code of the Extraordinary Mind, Vishen Lakhiani.
Oh, okay, cool. And then 8, we're going to bring this home. How will you use your leadership skills to make a difference to the world?
Yeah, look, my mission is to change people's lives in spite of the challenges that they've faced. So as a self-directed healing trainer, I'm now training people around the world, running the workshops, and just helping people live better lives. So I'm using my voice. I'm using the pain of my grief and the tragedy of losing my son to really help other people and inspire other people to know that we still can live a good life, even though life can throw us lemons.
That's lovely. I can just sing that as a quote out straight away. I love that so much. Thank you. You brought it home. Oh, look at that. Good stuff. There was a couple of points I found really interesting. All it was interesting, but 2 things stood out particularly to me. One was around the vulnerability side, and the other one was that out of that comfort zone, because also, like, it's that link, isn't it, too? Like, in order to be vulnerable, you're stepping out of your comfort zone, which also suggests that in the process of being vulnerable, you are learning, you are growing. And
And not only that, vulnerability is the pathway to connection and intimacy. So if you want to have better relationships with people, if you're a leader and you're leading a team, if you're in a relationship and, it's not working well and the walls are coming up, when you're vulnerable, when you show what you really feel, what you really think, who you really are, and you own up to not being perfect, that creates trust and it builds intimacy and connection. So vulnerability is incredibly important.
It's really interesting, Christy, how you just said then, like, about that creating trust and connection, because I actually had a conversation in the last few weeks actually with director here at Using Technology Better, because he's been asking people, like, going around the team and saying what builds connection, and we were doing some thinking around this, and I was saying to him that for me, connection comes when there is some trust. They are heavily linked, but to me it was like, I can really only trust people if I feel I know the real them, like, deep trust, not just I trust you to kind of cross the road with me. But and so I'm just thinking that's why we need to be vulnerable in order to build that trust. Otherwise you kind of just feel like you got a facade of someone, but you don't actually know what's behind the scenes.
Exactly. And even taking that a step further and linking that to the crucial conversations work that I do, conversations break down and relationships break down and workplace conflict arises because people don't feel safe and you haven't built a level of trust. And so what happens when you're not building trust and you're not building safety is people will withdraw, or they'll try to control or become more aggressive in that conversation and try to sort of get their point of opinion across. And so that whole vulnerability piece about owning where you're really at, it's quite pivotal, and it's getting out of the stories as well. You know, if they're victims, villains, or you're helpless, get rid of that. You're in story. It's like, what are the facts?
Yeah.
The facts. And, you know, just embracing in teamwork, for example, different minds, that diversity of thinking, because some leaders, and I've seen this over and over and over, they feel that they need to be in charge and they'll micromanage. They'll be the boss. They're trying to steer everything. But when you can actually be vulnerable and say, hey, I don't have all the answers. Let's get this together and let's get the conversation. Let's get the ideas out. Let people feel safe enough to put their ideas on the table without them being shot down or dismissed. The more people feel safe and comfortable, the more they will speak up, the more information you'll have to make better decisions.
Yeah, it's opening it up to that wisdom of the crowd. You know, particularly where often, you know, in a particularly larger organizations, the people on the ground, as you like to call it, have a lot of that wisdom, that knowledge, because they're generally directly doing the work and engaging with clients or whatever. So yeah, it's definitely I feel like by leaders really stepping into that, it's just opens it to be able to achieve so much more. So lovely. Well, thank you so much today, Christy, for our conversation.
You're most welcome.
I very much appreciate it. So before we wrap up, I'd love to know where people can find you, because I'm going to link all of those courses you've mentioned and all of that below, but give a shout out to yourself where people can find you.
So people will find me at christyrobertscoaching.com. That's my website. I have an events page on there which lists the workshops, and on social media, my social media handle across, you know, I've got a YouTube channel, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. It's all the same. It's at Christy Roberts Coaching.
Easy.
Pretty easy to find. Yeah.
I love it. Cool. And for anyone listening, it's Christy with a CH at the start. Yes. So I mean, I'll pop that in the notes anyway.
Yes. CHRISTY.
Beautiful. Let's make sure it's clear. I love it. Thank you again, Christy. So
thank you for having me.
You're welcome very much. I love your work and admire what you're doing. So really keen to share with the audience.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, everyone, that is it for today. So thank you so much for tuning in. Now, a couple of little admin tidbits before we wrap up. So if you are watching this on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the Using Technology Better YouTube channel so you can see when we release the latest episodes. Or if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, follow the show there as well. And don't forget, we've got that fortnightly newsletter full of efficiency, productivity, and organization tips and tricks and strategies. So link below to sign up to that. So that is it for today from me, but I will see you again soon for another bite-sized piece of the learning adventure that is life. See you then.
Bye.